This video will cover how you can get Anhalt in your port for very cheap, but more importantly, do you want it? Ugh. Now there are some good and bad parts to this German Tier 7 premium battleship. The number one absolute best thing about this ship, I'm going to save for the end of this video, but the most glaring feature, there are 15 guns strapped to the deck. That's a lot of shells you can throw in the air. She also has long-range secondaries, huge torpedoes, sonar, and she's a tank. But there are equally as many bad parts about this ship, and I want to break it down for you before you pick this ship over the Ohio. If you like German battleships, you're used to big tanky things bristling with guns, and Anhalt is really no different. Take a look at that HP pool. It's big and beautiful, 69,000 health. 5th best in the tier of these 30 battleships up here. That's great. The heals, they're nothing special, but of course you can run Master Mechanic and get 5 of them to keep you in the fight. Torpedo reduction, it's a typical German 20%, and the armor scheme is pretty decent. The highlights, of course, 50mm deck, and a much smaller superstructure than other German battleships. I mean, look at this thing compared to Bismarck, City Skyline, New York looking superstructure. It's crazy to me how Tirpitz and Bismarck can be some of the tankiest battleships at Tier 7, and they would be if not for their massive superstructures. Anyways, the bad parts. The turtleback armor scheme on Anhalt is actually pretty weak. It's not going to stop many battleship rounds from pinning you. So if you go broadside, you're going to get rocked. It's not the same as Tirpitz and Bismarck or Richelieu or some of the other ships at the tier. If you're brawling and you go broadside, this is not going to stop those rounds from getting to your citadel. Her guns, they get knocked pretty easily. And that's fine, I guess, because you have so many more, right? Well, you're going to want all of these guns because they're really, really super mediocre. They're basically like Tier 5 battleship guns. And past short distances, they're not going to pin much armor. Most broadside battleships are just going to laugh at you as you shoot them, so it might be best to aim for the upper belt as if you were a cruiser to get any sort of damage. On paper, you have 15 guns that reload in 30 seconds to the DPM looks pretty good. Higher than the nerfed Kansas, higher than the Monarch. But after a few matches in this thing, the reality is going to set in very fast. This AP is terrible. What it is good at though is shooting cruisers. So if you can ever catch one out in the open, that is going to be your target of choice. Not the heavily armored battleships, just because your guns won't be up to the task. Now for the secondaries, they have a great stock range up there with Bismarck Black, Brandenburg, and Zieten at 6.8 kilometers stock. Unfortunately though, you gotta read between the lines because there just isn't enough secondaries on this ship to be worth it. You have 8 150mm guns, 12 105s. Compare that to Bismarck's 12 150mm guns and 16 105s. Anhalt's secondary DPM just isn't there. You're not going to deal enough damage. So it may seem like a good idea to spec this thing full secondaries and brawling, but really it's a waste on the Anhalt. Now you do have sonar. Really good Zieten sonar, by the way. 5.6 kilometers and it lasts almost 2 minutes. It's a great deterrent for destroyers and really helpful to use. You know, the poor Bismarck still has that 4.4 kilometer sonar that's just not that great. So it's a high point of Anhalt. And you also have these wild point defense torpedoes. They're like British battlecruiser torps. They're huge. They deal massive amounts of damage, 25,600 per torp hit. Check out the firing angles as well. They're pretty crazy. You can fire them basically straight out of the front of the ship. The drawbacks, though, of course, are that these torpedoes are slow, and since they're so huge, they can be spotted from far away. Enemies have a lot of time to react and try to dodge them. They reload in 55 seconds, though. So if you're in a brawl, these things are pretty useful, and enemy battleships will have to be careful because these can deal a ton of damage, even if they hit right on the torp belt. Moving on, you have mediocre, not that great anti-air. But worse, you're super slow and sluggish. 26.5 knots makes you about as slow as Kansas and Atlantico. To make matters worse, your turning circle is about as bad as Iowa. A huge 900 meters, and the rudder shift really isn't that fast. So this is a big, clunky battleship. And did I mention big? Here's the Zieten. Here's the Brandenburg. Tirpitz in Bismarck Anhalt is bigger than all of them. She is a giant target. Also, concealment 15.3 kilometer stock isn't that great. It's pretty average, so I don't think this description of, being concealed or hidden is actually accurate. I never look at these pages on these ships, and I definitely wouldn't trust them. Don't look into that if you're buying a ship. But Tactic Angel and I were talking in the Discord yesterday morning, and he mentioned this ship was considered hidden. Tirpitz, Zieten, and Brandenburg are all more stealthy than the Anhalt. So in a nutshell, this is an interesting ship, and if you learn to play it properly, you can have decent results. On that note, here is your recommended build. Von Hipper and port everything into those main guns. Cunningham and Iachino will help buff your accuracy, so you'll get more of those shells on target. Personally, I opted for ARP Yamato, Arpeggio Yamato, as an inspiration because she'll help the god-awful turret traverse out a little bit, because the turret traverse is so slow. Almost 60 seconds, I believe. As for playing her, find a position at medium ranges where you can keep your guns cycling and just park and be a gun barge. Pour fire into the enemies and then push when the time is right. As a brawler, this ship is just too slow to get in and out of the action if things get hot, secondaries are too weak, and the turret traverse is too slow. Not a great brawler. Instead, spec into the guns, shoot HE when you're not getting much armor pen, shoot AP when you see cruisers, and there you have it. Now, I said I was saving the very, very, very best part of the ship for last, and here it is. You can get this thing for $10, 1/7 of the cost of a standalone Tier 7 Premium. That's right, normally $70. Here's how you do it. It currently costs 12,500 Ice Crowns as part of the Winter Update. You can purchase the Admiralty backing for the campaign of Brisbane for 2,500 doubloons, or $10, and that will net you 9,000 Ice Crowns once you complete the campaign. There is a gift in the store you can open that will give you another 500 Ice Crowns. And finally, by completing every day on the Advent calendar, you'll get another 3,000 Ice Crowns. And there you have it, 12,500 crowns in Anhalt and Brisbane for $10. Just know that, in my opinion, almost every other Tier 7 German battleship is better. Still though, Anhalt is an interesting and unique ship, and having 15 shells flying through the air is kind of fun, I'll admit. If you're willing to fork out a little extra money though, you can of course try to work your way up to the beastly American Ohio at Legendary tier, so if you're curious about how to do that and how good Ohio is, here's a video on her, and of course the Brisbane, our lovely Minotaur from down under. Like, sub, this is, oh god, now I can't stop talking like that. This is Derka signing off, see ya.